This is a pet project of the Colorado State Legislature and Governor Polis, and they're using our ratepayer dollars, which is really just a regressive tax.
Absolutely.
So when your rates go up, it's a regressive tax on the least among us. So I'm almost offended.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of PowerGab, your go-to show for all things energy and environmental policy in the state of Colorado. I'm Jake Fogleman, joined as always by my co-host, Amy Cooke. This week's episode is going to be a little transportation focused because we've had a few things pop up in the news related to transportation and environmental policy in the state. The first is this new grand announcement of something called Vision 2035. What is Vision 2035, Amy?
You know, I got to give Marianne Goodland credit. There's so many gems in here that we can talk about. This is, I don't know if she meant to do it, but man, she wrote an excellent story, and it's very straightforward. So we'll just start with this. Jared Polis and his environmental left allies, meaning pretty much the entire Democrat contingency down at the state legislature, but I would say this was special interest groups that they announced Vision 2035 for transportation, and it does have an energy and environmental policy angle to it. Now, this is what Marianne says. There's so much good stuff. And the vision outlines a familiar approach to urban planning embraced by Democrats, one that favors clusters of housing near transit systems as part of a larger push to, guessed it, minimize your mobility freedom, meaning your ability to use your car. So what exactly is in this? This is what the vision, this is from the vision, the state's aspiration. Now, I don't remember voting on this, but apparently this is the state's aspiration on livability, sustainability, and affordability. Lays tracks for expanding convenience, low-cost transit, improving safety. What it basically is, they're going to expand transit by 83%. Now, I don't know how they came up with that number, and I don't even know what that means, but neither does Polis, so we're all in good company. It's going to create 81% more bike lanes and bike paths, and 3.5% more sidewalks. Additionally, 52% of new housing will be in transit-oriented areas. Now, again, I don't know how you do that unless you are telling developers where they must build. Like, you can't build on this piece of land where somebody might want to actually live. You have to be in this transit-oriented area. So basically, that's what this aspirational vision for 2035. I always think of this. I had a vision like there was some kind of religious or spiritual
touched by the hand of Gaia. Gaia came down and laid its green hand on you.
That's right. That's exactly right. But here's the kicker. This is the beautiful part. And again, this is Marianne Goodland simply just relaying the facts of what this Vision 2035 is. Polis said that his vision would cut 1.2 million metric tons of greenhouse gases and reduce emissions by 65% by 2035. Now, that sounds like a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like 1.2 million metric tons, that sounds huge between now and 2035, except for when you actually put it into context. So China's greenhouse gas emissions every single day, just every day, 39.5 million metric tons. So Polis's grand vision, this vision by 2035, this aspirational plan that he's going to expand transit by 83%. So he's going to expand a capacity very few people use by 83%. More about the cost on that in a minute, but he's going to expand it by 83%. We're going to have more bike lanes. We're going to have all this stuff, and he's going to cut greenhouse gas emissions by a tiny little fraction. It'll have it's it's incalculable. There's no measurement. You couldn't measure it, and it will have no impact on climate change. That doesn't stop, the sycophants from saying, "Oh, yay, we have a vision for 2035." I mean, this is a plan that will do zero, but it is indicative of Colorado's. I guess they want to defy all odds, and Colorado alone, is going to halt climate change, and we're all going to pay for it.
Single-handedly solve climate change. That's what I love. It's a decade-long, obviously, plan, Vision 2035, to slash 1/40th of China's daily emissions output. And you mentioned the cost a second ago. It's another thing I have to give kudos to Marianne Goodland about, because very few reporters, when reporting on these stories, actually ever ask the questions about cost. But she puts it, very second graph in the piece. She says, when pressed, Polis declined to put a dollar figure on the vision, saying it's about how we do more with the way we plan and build. It's also not immediately clear how the governor would pay for the plan. So what are we talking about here? I mean, same thing with indicative of Colorado's broader approach. Where have we seen before where this government announces a grand plan to slash greenhouse gas emissions, it's a multi-decade project, big strategic vision, and declined to put a dollar figure? Have we seen that before?
Yeah, I'm having flashbacks.
Yeah.
2018, when we're going to go to 100% solar and wind and batteries. And do you have a cost? Oh, no, but I love this line. He said this, Polis said this. No, we don't know the cost yet, but we know it's not going to be 45 billion. And he's right. It's just 10 times that.
Right.
So does he have a cost? No, he has no cost.
Right.
He has, again, indicative of Colorado's approach to, we're going to tackle climate change. And they're going to have this grand aspirational plan that will do nothing to mitigate emissions, actually. I mean, in the grand scheme of things. And it's going to cost, well, we don't know how much or how it's going to be paid for. But my guess is we're talking about billions.
Definitely billions.
Probably, tens of billions. And that's okay because it's aspirational.
Right. We've seen this movie before, for sure, where the Independence Institute's the only voice that tries to research and put dollar figures on these government plans. The government says, no, you guys are way too high. And then, years later, we underestimated how much this is going to cost.
And by the way, it's, 1.2 million metric tons.
Right.
Put that in context. China, 39.5 million metric tons every single day.
And I love the point you made about when you were reading sort of what's part of the plan, the odd percentages that aren't round numbers. 83% of transit service, 81% more bike lanes, 3.5% more sidewalks. I just love that because it's totally done in a way to put a veneer over what's fundamentally unknowable central planning. It's the classic fallacy of central planning is thinking that you can, down to the decimal point, if we just get the experts in the room, we can, 52% of transit-oriented housing, people will want to live there. We know what the consumer wants, and it's just so anathema to how markets actually operate in the real world. It's a lesson that we learned over the 20th century. It was a hard-learned lesson in many places of the world, but I just love that it's back to the same old well that we have a precise calculation of how much transit is desirable and how much bike lanes are desirable and where people want to live. The government will tell you.
Because by 2035, we know what the people in 2035 want.
Right.
We know what the person who moves to Colorado in 2035, hopefully to take a job. Heck, by 2035, they will have destroyed the economy. People will probably be moving out. We may not even need 83% more transit or 52% more housing that is transit oriented. Not that we would ever need it, but we probably won't need the more housing because the economy will be in the tank based on all the spending that we have. But here's the other thing. Usually these transit-oriented development, this manufactured, quote, manufactured market that they're going to create out of whole cloth usually goes along some major corridor.
Right.
So I-70, I-25, someplace, because so that they can they plan to move great amounts of people, but nobody's really using it yet. So I don't know why they think suddenly everybody's going to embrace it. But the interesting thing about this, and I say this as they put it along some of these major thoroughfares, and I don't know. I know this is a little bit of a squirrel moment, right? Have you driven I-25 lately? I mean, I'm sure you have, but.
Yeah.
I drive it occasionally going north, obviously I live in northern Colorado. I don't know why it looks the way it does, but in a state that is stunningly beautiful with so many natural resources, and people claim to care about the environment of the state, why does I-25 look like a giant dumpster all along the side of the road? I realize I'm getting off on a little bit of a tangent, but I was gone for a few years, admittedly. I came back, and I-25 is disgusting.
Yeah.
It is like you could probably furnish your house with tossed out
refuse.
Yeah, there are chairs, there are couches, there are mattresses, old desks, and I called somebody one day. I was trying to go, hey, I-25 is disgusting. What happened? It was, oh my gosh, I guess I'm just numb to it. How sad is that?
It is sad. And I don't actually think that is a tangent. I think that is fundamentally related because the trajectory of the state has been to siphon transit dollars towards quote unquote multimodal options, which is bike lanes and transit and all sorts of things that, to your point, people aren't using, especially transit. It's way down from pre-pandemic levels. But it flies in the face of this other sort of competing goal, which is sort of foreshadowing our next topic of getting everyone into electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Electric vehicles need roads, and they need those roads to be maintained. And if all of your dollars are being siphoned to boost transit by 83%, I'm not sure how these things, it's just a lot of incoherence in some of the central planning. And I think it is actually directly related to, we're already seeing the effects of negligence on our roads. And this, if Vision 2035 or whatever becomes an all hands approach, I think you're going to see more of that.
And the other thing on that is, remember, Polo said he wasn't going to build any more roads. Mm-hmm. He isn't going to build it, and he isn't even maintaining the ones we do have. He has made it clear that he isn't maintaining the ones that I-25. It's like a moonscape. I-70, same thing. You get out on the. I will say they have done a couple of miles just across the Kansas line, so you're tricked. I made this drive recently, coming from Kansas, driving west. It was like, oh my gosh. And I think Mark Hillman even wrote a column about, they've done a few miles, but don't worry, it gets back to its moonscape. You aren't on smooth surface for long. But that's I-70. Same thing with I-25. It's a nightmare. The other thing is this, unclear about how he's going to pay for it or even how much it's going to cost. We are looking at hundreds of billions of dollars for the forced march, what they call the energy transition to wind, solar, and batteries, unreliable intermittent sources. This is another one of those.
Right.
And people aren't going to be able to afford their utility bills. Now you're going to make them not afford the ability to have transportation.
Right.
This is, and he will be gone.
Yep.
He will be gone.
That is the first part. Yeah, it's all these folks making these plans will be long gone out of office when the bill comes due. And to your point, it's all happening at the same time. This is not independent of those other broad plans that we've talked about so often on this show. But moving on to our semi-related next story, having to do with electric vehicles and ratepayers' money. Xcel Energy just announced that it had totally exhausted the $5 million that were allocated from ratepayers like you and I. So thank you collectively for forking those over for rebates for folks to get electric vehicles. So essentially a subsidy provided by the monopoly utility for folks to purchase electric vehicles. And they've already exhausted that $5 million. So once again, Xcel's running out of money for these green programs.
They ran out of our money. Yeah, well, I appreciate the fact, and they've said they're not going back to the PUC to get more. Yeah. So I appreciate that.
That's true.
Your wallet is safe for at least a couple of months here. We don't know if they'll go back to the trough, meaning you and me, again in 2025. But this is from Xcel. $5.3 million fund was covered 1,176 rebates for new and used EVs. And an XL spokesman said there will be roughly 100 customers who received notice that even though they qualified for the rebate, and I don't know what the dollar amount was to qualify. I don't know if
off the top of my head,
I don't know what that was, but they will no longer be funded. Their rebate is just, you're not going to get it. Now you can still get what, $7,500. If you got a new one, you can still get something like $7,500 from the Fed.
From the
so
feds,
it's not like
and
you're
$5,000 from the state.
So you're not totally out.
Yeah.
Like if you want an EV, you can still get the cash, but you're just not going to get the rebate from XL Energy. And again, it's just one of these stories where they're like, yeah, no, we ran out of money. This was to help EVs, but we gave away all the money. We helped EVs, and we're not going back for more.
Yeah, I want to quote Michelle Aguayo. This is in a Colorado Sun report about them running out of money, because I sort of appreciate what they're saying here. We are in the process of analyzing and understanding the full customer impact. In the meantime, we've been communicating with those customers who may request a rebate but didn't receive it. Their entire base of ratepayers in Colorado fund the rebate programs available through XL, and we are keeping affordability in mind as we manage our budgets. So I actually appreciate, for once, they're worried about ratepayer affordability, and they're not running back to request another subsidy from socialized across the rate base. It's a nice, refreshing change, but it's another thing in sort of a string of these proceedings we've talked about, where PUC approves, basically welfare from the rest of the captive rate base, and it gets exhausted by folks. This one, to be fair, was income qualified, which I appreciate, but stuff like we talked about the marijuana grow energy efficiency story a couple of weeks back. Folks just need to be aware that this ain't the only rebate program out there. It's not going to be the last one, but this is what's going on with your ratepayer money.
So what was this? A $3,000? No, $5,500. So $7,500, $5,500, and what was the state?
$5,000, I believe.
Oh man, yeah. Another $5,000 on top of that.
I believe so, yes.
So you're looking at what, if I've done my math, what about $18,000 roughly? $18,000, and it was so low income families would get an EV.
Right.
Yet at the same time, too, you're driving up their electricity rates.
That's right.
I mean, if this doesn't make sense to you, it's okay, because it doesn't. The economics doesn't make sense to anybody else. But the interesting thing, EVs, they're okay for a second vehicle. If you are a low income family and you've got a couple of kids and you're running all over, and you've got you've got the baseball stuff, the football stuff, you've got cheerleading stuff, you've got, you're running carpool, $18,000 off of an EV that is the size of a matchbox in some cases. Larger ones, the low income families aren't going to be able to afford.
Right.
I mean, this is at the same time that they're now going to spend more on transit, less on roads. They're putting you in a car that is less safe, but weighs more, and so will actually cause more road damage. I mean, it's a bit bipolar.
It is. All of this is. It's all over the place. Like I mentioned in the first segment, diverting all this money to non-car travel, but then also diverting all this money to forcing people to buy a certain type of car that will require well-maintained roads because it puts more wear and tear on those roads. None of it makes sense. It's all schizophrenic. It's all a ton of money from taxpayers and ratepayers. And I just don't know what the end goal is. I just don't understand why we can't go back to the tried and true system of let free consumers choose what they want to purchase. I think EVs are great, and if it suits your lifestyle, by all means, use your hard-earned dollars to go buy one.
Right, but why do we have to pay for it?
Right, that's exactly right.
Why does a low-income family in rural Colorado, for whom, or in a low-income family that needs a minivan, why do they have to Why do they have to pay to fund, really the lifestyle of wealthier Coloradans? Because that's ultimately what this ends up being. And I will say this too. I am tired of the legislature allowing Xcel to use our dollars for their pet projects.
Right.
That's what this is. This is a pet project of the Colorado State Legislature and Governor Polis, and they're using our ratepayer dollars, which is really just a regressive tax.
Absolutely.
So when your rates go up, it's a regressive tax on the least among us. So I'm almost offended. No, I'm not almost. I am offended at the we're going to help low income ratepayers. No, you're not. You're jacking up the price of their freedom of their mobility.
Right.
It's offensive.
Yep. And to your point about the regressive tax, it's a tax you don't even get to vote on, because unlike Tabor, where you get to vote on actual tax increases, these rate hikes just get passed through some bill that you probably aren't aware of, goes to the PUC in a proceeding you're probably not aware of, and they say, Xcel, go run wild, use those ratepayer dollars, and your bill goes up and you never got a say in the matter. So, but as we're coming up on time here, Amy, do you have any takeaways for our listeners on any of these stories?
Yeah, we've had this, I'll call this show our Colorado energy policy in a nutshell, to use a phrase that you were using prior to coming on the air. We don't know how much the cost is. We on these new aspirational programs, we'll find out later after we have to do it to find out what the cost is. So this is characteristic. This is exactly the way Colorado does energy policy over the last, really since the Polis administration. This has been from Polis onward. So 2018 on. That's number one. These two stories alone. Number two, this ultimately ends up being a regressive tax on the least among us, whether it's through your electricity rates or through your taxes. This is going to hurt the least among us and have zero impact on greenhouse gas emissions overall. Zero. It will be, we will not even be able to calculate it. That number will be that small. And three, because I say it all the time, still, as we continue to electrify, because that's what this electric vehicle thing is, the grid in Colorado becomes more unreliable. So still get yourself a generator.
Always sage advice. That does it for us on another episode of PowerGab. If you like what you saw here, you can head on over to powergab.org for our entire back catalog. We produce new episodes every single week. We're also available wherever you get your audio-only podcasts, whether that's Spotify or Apple. And if you'd like to suggest future show topics or a guest you'd like to see us interview, you can send those over to info@powergab.org. We love to hear from you guys. And until next week, we'll see you.